How do products from your local farmer end up on your plate? What happens to food waste? Can we offer quality food in the fight against food poverty? Integrated urban food policies can answer these questions. And the FoodTrails project is helping cities develop their own to positively impact food systems, from farm to fork. The project operates under the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact and responds to the EU Food 2030 policy. Each partner city is running a living lab to find tangible solutions to specific food issues. From developing food councils to coordinating food aid, from strategic public procurement to food education. In FoodTrails, collaboration is a key ingredient. At the local level, relevant stakeholders are involved in designing solutions. And at project level, researchers and European cities come together to exchange and learn from each other. Create your own recipe for more sustainable, healthy and inclusive urban food policies. Join the FoodTrails momentum.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Welcome to this already fourth episode of the FoodTrails webinar series, Midday Munchies on urban food policy. Before we start diving into today's topic, a few words about the FoodTrails project. It's a 4-year EU-funded Horizon 2020 project, which aims to translate the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact's collective commitment to integrating urban food policies into measurable and long-term progress towards sustainable food systems. As you might have seen in the video, the project worked with 11 European cities in supporting them to implement sustainable, healthy, and inclusive food policies. So yeah, nice to meet you. I am Lucie Jeandrain, Urban Food Project Officer at Eurocities, and I will be moderating today's webinar. A few words about Eurocities as a FoodTrails partners. Eurocities is the leading network of over 200 major European cities, working together to ensure good quality of life for all our citizens. And one of the 7 goals is to support urban food systems, which we are doing through the FoodTrails project, amongst other activities. Next slide, please. So we are here today with Casiraghi, or cross-cutting manager of the project that focused on circularity in cities, with Natalia Boitot, the international project officers for the city of Warsaw, and Samuel Ewell, the project partner of the city of Birmingham for the Who Said This Is Rubbish initiatives. Next slide, please. So what is this webinar series about? After almost 4 full years of the project, this webinar series aims at sharing beyond the project consortium the knowledge and experiences built by the FoodTrails cities and experts. Each webinar is aimed to promote the replication of solutions and best practices and hopefully inspire some of you to do the same in your own city. The series will touch on many topics such as local food, food waste like today, or public procurement. You can have a look in the chat at the calendar of each episode. If you want to sign up for one specific webinar, please follow us on social media to also receive the sign up link. Next slide, please. So today's already 4th webinar out of the 8 webinar planned is going to dive into the role of cities when tackling food waste. So food waste is a significant problem that affects our environment, our economy, and our society. Because when we waste food, we also waste all the resources used to produce, process, and transport it, such as water, land, energy, and labor. Cities are places where many people live, work, and eat, are in great position to address this issue effectively. But yeah, why focusing on food waste? Food waste reveals deeper problem within our food systems, from overproduction and inefficient supply chains to consumer habits and inadequate policies. Food waste highlights the need for a comprehensive approach to how we produce, distribute, and consume food. For today's webinar, Lucie Casiraghi will talk about the relevance and ways for cities to reduce and prevent food waste in cities. We will then leave the floor to Natalia Boitot and then to Samuel Ewell. We will present how they successfully worked in tackling food waste problems in the city of Warsaw and the city of Birmingham. Before I leave the floor to Alice, some extra logistic info for the people attending this webinar. At the end of the presentation of all the speakers, 20 minutes will be given for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please write them in the Q&A environment of Zoom. Questions that are written in the chat will not be considered. And I will also send you a link to a short form that I would kindly ask you to fill in to get your feedback on this webinar and to also improve the next coming webinar. Thank you very much again to everyone for being here. And Alice, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lucie. I'm very happy to be here. As you might have seen in the introduction, FoodTrails, the work of FoodTrails is based on the 4 Food 2030 pillars, and one of them is circularity. And I represent the cross-cutting manager for circularity. And so I help cities consider this topic in their work and advise them on what can be potential issues to tackle, potential solutions. Next slide, please. So how to frame the food waste issue? I guess if you work with cities already, you are familiar with this, but food waste happens at many stages of the value chain, from production to distribution to retail and consumption. Some cities have very strong links with the production, so the agricultural land around the city. Some other cities less. But then there is the issue of distribution. So that can involve, for example, the cold chain or inefficiencies in transportation. That can be inefficiencies in the communication to drive the transportation, or in retail because of oversupply, overstocking, because of perishable items, and sometimes because of the communication on the packaging that makes it makes the food impossible to be eaten after a certain date, legally, or because behaviorally we believe the food is already expired. Sometimes it's not. And so also at the consumption stage, but both at the retail and consumption stage, we reject imperfect produce. Sometimes we don't plan well enough, or we buy too much, and there's confusion on labels. And this is not only at the personal level, but it happens in canteens, in restaurants, it happens in all the food services. And also incorrect storage is another issue. I guess Natalia might talk about it later. Next slide, please. So it's an issue of coordination. And because the food value chain is so complex, we need to get better at coordinating the efforts of all the actors, of the stakeholders of the supply chain to reduce waste. But it's not just about waste reduction. I think circularity is a step further. The 3 principles of circularity are designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in use, and regenerating natural systems. And this means that we need to plan the whole value chain in a way that it doesn't include the concept of waste since the very beginning, since the planning and design phase. And so the idea is that anything that can be waste for me is a resource for somebody else. So in the food chain, solutions can range from various domains. For example, we can improve legislation and awareness to prevent food waste in consumption. So there can be better labels. As said before, labels sometimes are misleading, and they lead consumers or restaurants to throw away food because it says expired or best before, and we never know what to interpret. But it could be just citizens and food system workers' awareness that prevents food waste. If I know better, I know that certain things don't have to be thrown away. Then there is the issue of data. We measure a lot of things in our economies. We measure production, distribution, we measure the people that work for our companies, but food waste and waste in general is one of the least measured items in our economy. So we really need to collect data on the food value chain and the food waste streams. And this includes agricultural production, because in agricultural production, there's a lot of waste that goes uncounted. And in the broader spectrum of circularity, that could go either to feed animals, or it could go to fashion, textiles, construction. It can link the food system with all the other systems within the city. Then other solutions can be related to behavioral nudging, so supporting better choices with the new design of the environment, of the food environment, in school feeding programs or with citizens, with programs targeted to different categories of citizens. Then we need definitely to train the professionals and reskill them for circularity, because as said before, circularity is a broader concept than reducing waste or making the food system a bit more efficient, but it's about rethinking waste streams and partnerships, rewarding schemes for businesses, incrementing efficiency and digitalization in production, logistics, and distribution, and then supporting dietary shifts towards more climate-friendly options. If you waste a kilo of peas or a kilo of meat, the climate impact will be different. So that's, again, associated to waste. And then support and implementation of recollection schemes with key stakeholders and partnerships. Partnerships are super essential in the circular economy, because nobody can reduce all of their waste on their own. Next slide, please. There is a very insightful research on circularity in Europe from Wageningen University. I hope I pronounced it well enough, but it's about the research investigates 4 future scenarios that are based on the food that we produce today, the food that we can produce with a more circular system that can feed European citizens with the same nutritional levels, or that can feed European citizens following healthier dietary patterns. For example, the Eat Lancet guidelines. That is, it's a diet suggested by the Eat Foundation that is fair for the planet and healthy and good for us. So better nutrition and more circularity. And then there is another scenario in which we make the food system circular in Europe by improving agriculture, by improving our diets, and also feeding populations beyond Europe. It's a very complex report. I invite you to read it if you have the time. Next slide. It also talks about how to reconvert land and how to optimize the use of land, integrating energy production or use of manure, or animals with forest, agroforestry, silvopasture, these kind of solutions. According to Project Drawdown, the climate impacts of food waste are huge. This is why this is such an important priority in food systems. Reducing food waste is the #1 priority, and the second one is plant-rich diet to curb climate change according to the Paris Agreement levels. Next slide. Oh. Okay, sorry. So the idea is that, as you can see in the scheme, I will just skim through, but the idea is that you can consider the whole supply chain from the governance level to the regulations, the education, finance, logistics, data collection, and then you go from production to transformation, distribution, and consumption, and you try to link the different parts of the system and find repurposed waste in a way or another. Next slide. I will leave you with some open questions about how to implement circularity in your food system. And the questions are, for example, which circular economy allies do you have access to in your city? As a policy officer, food policy officer, you might have some stakeholders that are more interested than others in making reducing food waste. So start from them. How much of the food system you currently measure, or how much of the waste streams are currently measured, and what can be done to improve it? What is the link with the rural area, between the city and the rural area? What is the level of awareness of your citizens regarding food waste or packaging waste for that matter? And how much do kids know about food and where it comes from in your city? This is important if you oversee, for example, school feeding programs. Or how much does the private sector know about food waste prevention when you want to bring about a more general change with the food industry and the citizens. Last slide. So the suggestions range from interacting with policymakers of other departments of your city to really bring together the largest amount of stakeholders to tackle food waste in an integrated way, and also involving businesses, helping them change, retraining them, or rewarding the best practices, and then the citizens recovering local practices, but also measuring, helping them, communicating with them, and creating communities of practices where you can get the feedback of the citizens that are most involved in this topic. I am done, I think, with this. There was a lot to say, so I hope I didn't take too much time. But back to you, Lucie.
Thank you very much, Alice. Thank you for this very insightful and clear overview of food waste and circularity issues in city. I'm now going to leave the floor to Natalia for more concrete examples of how the city of Warsaw is taking this issue and tackling it. Natalia, the floor is yours.
Yes, so good morning, everybody. So today I will speak about the Warsaw Food Lab. So you will see right now that we've established in Warsaw within the FoodTrails project, the Warsaw Food Lab, which is dedicated to co-create actually innovations for the Warsaw food system. And this is actually a very original way we've done it, because on the next slide, you'll see that it is a close cooperation together with the SWPS University, which means that we've created a multidisciplinary team. More details on the next slide, where we have put together a core team of city officers, but also of public policy professors, of design thinking, designers, moderators, facilitators, regenerative design, etc., like specialists. And together we are basing it on an original method, which is human-centered design, which means that we always have the end user in consideration and interaction. Then we use systemic thinking. We are trying to have the big picture in order to know where in the system we can have a leverage. And we use mechanism of change in order to define concretely what kind of change we want to achieve and how to measure it. And it is a multi-phase method, like the React method called. So here it might be a bit complicated at first, but it's very logical. It means that first we have to define what is the topic and the issue we want to focus. And we also have to define the target groups, because then you have different approaches. Then we explore the situation, doing empirical field research. We try to understand the end user and what are the behaviors. Then we analyze the results of this research, and we're trying to understand what kind of barriers exist. And then while creating the solution, we try to also invent or create solutions together still with the end user that are decreasing these barriers. And then we prototype the solution and we test it. We'll see in the next slides how it worked. First, we have made a desk research to select the topic actually of food waste reduction and prevention. And it has led us to the definition of 2 target groups on the next slide. Which means that we are aiming at one, a behavioral change, 2, an institutional one. And in the first case, we selected 2 target groups, which are restaurants, small restaurants, and also organizations that receive food from the food bank. And at the same time, we wanted to disseminate this method within the city of Warsaw, but also we wanted to have a specially dedicated lab to food-related challenges. We can go on the next slide. There are different kinds of innovative solutions actually that we establish with this kind of method. It can be technological, process, or small interventions. And then for the first topic, food waste prevention for small restaurants, we can move forward. Actually, we've made a lot of empirical field research. For example, we have mapped the food flow through the restaurants. Then we have issued a report and also a legal framework analysis, because we've discovered that the legal framework about food waste in Poland is very complicated. On the next slide, we will see that then after having this report and this analysis, we have decided to work either on food storage or on the legal context. And we have always been in interaction with the restaurators. And on the next slide, you see that we decided to tackle the aspect of the fear of legal repercussions among the restaurant owners if they give the food away, the food surplus away. So we have created a whole campaign. Here you have some of the graphs, but actually we created, on the next slide, you'll see a user-friendly knowledge compendium. We have also created a whole campaign to connect restaurant owners and NGOs, and we've got also some support from the business sector. On the next slide, you will see that we also have conducted a campaign on our social media. We are still in the middle of it. We have a special website who describes all the steps, how to connect restaurants and organizations, because in Poland, we need to give food surpluses away to concrete organizations. We have posters, stickers, and yes, the knowledge compendium, obviously. So this is ongoing, and we are testing this solution. The second key topic was food management optimization, actually, in the organization receiving food from the food banks. Why did we select this topic? Actually, it was already an issue that was existing, but the war outbreak in Ukraine and the refugee crisis we have faced has led us to discover this challenge. And we were also a bit concerned about how the food management in such emergency phases is organized. So on the next slide, you see that we've made some empirical field research. We've done two. The first one was to understand what is happening during the refugee crisis. And the other one was more to tackle in a pilot the aspect of food aid distribution and how to tackle food management optimization. So actually to prevent food waste in the food aid system. On the next slide, you'll see that we've made a report to understand all these different aspects and also the food flow through the organizations. And then we have decided that we will focus on the storage, as in the next slide. That's the solution we have decided to focus on after many workshops and many interactions with the end users. And actually, we wanted to optimize the longevity of the fruit, vegetables, bread, etc., food products within the organizations. We've created a smart storage system, but also a whole system of incentives and of nudge for the staff that are very often volunteers, and something which is easy for the onboarding of the turnover of the staff. So on the next slide, this is the solution we have implemented, and we have also reshuffled the whole system of storage within the organization. The pilot was done in a shelter for homeless people. So here you can see like an example of the storage element we have created and brought on board. And a parallel initiative we have taken, which came from this whole situation, was actually a series of roundtables with retailers, so business sector, food lawyers, and the food bank, to see different perspectives. And that's very important in this method we are using. And then we also have created different social media profiles. You can join us on LinkedIn, obviously, and follow our work. Sorry, it was a bit longer than 5 minutes.
No worries. Thank you very much, Natalia, for this super interesting presentation of what Warsaw is doing. Thank you.
Yes.
Now I'm going to leave the floor to Samuel Ewell from the city of Birmingham.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucie, and thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm greeting you from Birmingham, UK, where I'm based. And I wanted to tell you about what we've been up to. We've called our food waste pilot, Who Said This Is Rubbish? And it's based in one geographic area in Birmingham, the Ladywood area. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give you a sense of where we are on the ground and why Ladywood. You can see these three pictures. There are three distinct neighborhoods in Ladywood. One where you've got what we would call terraced homes with back gardens, the middle, which is very vertical, the tower blocks. And then the third one is a new neighborhood called Port Loop, where they have shared or communal gardens. So the reason Ladywood was chosen is because in the waste management profile of the city, if you imagine like you have a football table with 20 teams, well, Ladywood was number 20. They were at the bottom of the table for waste management. Complex reasons for that, but we decided to do it in Ladywood, because it's my neighborhood, but also because we were thinking if we can do it in Ladywood, it can be done anywhere in Birmingham. Next slide. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about why we called it Who Said This Is Rubbish? And we call our turning point moment happened to do with a banana peel. So this is the show and tell moment. I've brought a banana that's on the way out. But the inspiration for this actually came all the way from Brazil, when I used to live in Brazil, when I was challenged about 15 years ago by a friend who was composting on the 5th floor of a tower block. And he held up a banana peel when I asked him why he was doing it. And he said, if this was alive and it's going to go back to the life cycle, it will decompose and will, make soil. Who said it's rubbish? He was saying this in Portuguese, but who authorized us? Who said it was rubbish? So we chose this as the title very much to build into the theory of change, this perception that we wanted to start with. What do we perceive as rubbish? Next slide. So we gave it this title, and we did a range of things, but basically it was place-based, it was resident-led, and we recruited through workshops over 1 year, through workshops, a network of people who would compost basically either at their home or be willing to do it in partnership with neighbors. Next slide. So part of what we really wanted to test was this idea of a movement. What would it look like? I put at the bottom of this slide. What if every resident is in walking distance connection to a mother garden and a soil site? So a soil site is where we do the work together. And a mother garden is where we can grow from the soil that we're making. And really what we're testing, and this was our hypothesis, is that the problem with composting at household, street, or neighborhood level is not technical per se. Yes, it involves technique, it involves technology, but the fundamental problem is not technical, but social. It's people being connected enough and also to normalize it or to socialize it, that you're not weird or whatever. So we really wanted to push that you need multiple infrastructure. You need the green infrastructure, which is the systems, the technology, but you also need the social infrastructure for it to become normal. Next, please. So you've probably heard the expression, it takes a village, it takes a community. So again, that might sound cliche, but this is very much what we were testing. In the middle, there's my friend Abba from Ethiopia, and we were, again, one thing connects to the other. The composting naturally leads to the garden, and if you're starting in the garden, then naturally you will want to produce more soil to not have to buy it. So you might be familiar with the expression, many hands make light work, and that's very much at the heart of what we're doing. Okay, next. Right, and here we talk about composting as a vital entry point into the whole growth cycle. Again, I'm reinforcing this idea that we were weaving together, instead of seeing composting or food waste as an isolated thing, trying to reconnect it into a natural pattern, which is composting and growing. Next. And there's one more kind of infrastructure that we like to talk about. I mentioned green infrastructure, that's the technology, social infrastructure, that's your networks and support, but also we like to talk about imagination infrastructure. And that board that you see, that illustration, was drawn by a friend, Zoya, to capture this whole flow and how composting is one moment of returning this. And again, we were socializing how it's precious. It's waste if you throw it away. But let's talk about food scraps, because everyone has food scraps. And if you return them, then they're not waste. And then we would reinforce what's possible. And in the garden, for example, we notice how the garden is generous. The garden, if you're around it, it's abundant. So that imagination of challenging what we previously saw as rubbish and how it becomes valuable if we reconnect it with the cycle. Next. Right. And then there's another bit that I want to talk about in the workshops. And I guess you could talk about wanting to be playful, to be creative. So one of the kids who came to one of the workshops, you'll see the worms on the left, and I'm holding the worms here, but he coined the term wormingham, which rhymes with Birmingham. So we like to talk about inviting people to Wormingham. Again, it's playful. It's about making it normal and not strange. Next slide. One other piece that was really vital was having a digital platform to connect people. We use this app called Make Soil. And I like to think about Make Soil. It's like a dating app for people who have food scraps, and people, they're called soil supporters. They're willing to give their food scraps, and they are dating or matched with people who are soil makers, who are willing to receive. And those green dots there are everywhere in B16 where we have sites set up. So it's, again, a very useful, to me, Make Soil. I'm a big fan. It's the best example that I've experienced of a digital technology that reinforces in real life relationships. Next slide. I just wanted to share here. So this was from the first workshop a year ago. And again, part of our theory of change was to socialize that we need to have compost champions. And this is feedback from Jacqueline. What a success. You're doing such great work. And it's that enthusiasm. What, again, it spreads through actual people doing the work. Next slide. And I want to connect it back. FoodTrails is part of this multi-city network, but also Birmingham itself has its specific food strategy that we're fitting within. And I wanted to connect that back. But part of what I wanted to also share was these patterns that we notice. One, I call them 3 metaphors for sense making or pattern recognition. Again, these are all patterns. If you're a gardener, you will have observed these. One is to observe and create favorable microclimates, just spaces where people feel they belong, they can ask questions, and they feel supported. This is vital for it to spread. Also, valuing and tending the margins, which is those edges in the neighborhood where people don't know each other, but one of the unintended outcomes or kind of unexpected outcomes is when people start to compost together, they have an excuse to be neighbors. It allows them to actually be a neighbor on purpose. And then the third thing is seeing compost as, of course, a biological process of putting decaying organic material together, but it's also a parable or like a metaphor for how we organize at the human scale of putting together people and places and things that are normally separated. Okay, I think we're going to the last slide now. And yes, this is just weaving it back into the Birmingham food strategy, these 3 pillars of environment, communities, and economy. And I just wanted to connect it back to something that Natalia said with your React method about reframing. At the heart of what we've done is really just trying to reinforce this idea that reframing the problem. If the problem is waste, and we all recognize that, there's a phrase we like to use, the solution is in the problem. So if the problem is wasting things, having neighborhoods where people are disconnected and disconnected from food, the solution actually begins straight from your plate, but taking those food scraps, making soil, growing food, being more connected. So I'll end with that, trying to reframe how the solution is actually in the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samuel, for this very exciting presentation of your project. Yeah, thank you very much for all your presentations. Before we dive into the Q&A of the participants, I might have maybe also some questions for you. And in the meantime, I encourage all the participants to write their question in the Q&A chat. Natalia and Samuel, maybe a question for you. I feel like both of your presentations mentioned the importance of engaging with stakeholders and really have this exchange going on. As someone working for a city, what would you say is the role of a city officer in engaging with these stakeholders? I don't know who wants to answer first. Natalia.
Okay, thanks. Well, I think that was one of the most important aspects of our lab, actually. And as you've seen, the method already includes a multidisciplinary team. And we know that as city officer, from behind our desk, we have a too narrow view to understand what is happening. And actually, the method we use is exactly in order to understand what is the problem, who is responsible for it, but also merge different perspectives, because that's only when we can understand better the ecosystem, the situation, and also find really efficient solutions. Because if we don't come up together, that cannot be like optimal, obviously. So as a city, we wanted, and together with the research sector, this is very important for us, because alone we won't be able to have all this process and all this reflection, all these workshops, and all this facilitation as well with different stakeholders. That's the role we see being as a platform of knowledge exchange, but also of co-creation, actually. So in all the solutions I've presented, actually, you've seen that we've been in touch with the NGOs, with the business sector as well, and one of them was also like the target group of our solutions, also with citizens. So I would say this is like a fundamental ingredient of being a city officer working on such complex topics, actually. And also we use this behavioral insight. I wanted to also highlight this. We use evidence-based approach. For this, we need a lot of different people and a lot of experts. So this is fundamental. And we also use behavioral insights because we want to change the behaviors, not only education. It is very important, but that's not the only one aspect that we have to take into consideration. But we really want the people to change their behavior in such behaviors that are beneficial for themselves, but also for the society and for the environment. So we want to facilitate the good choices, let's say so.
Thank you, Natalia. Samuel, do you want to jump on that?
Thank you. That's really good. I'm coming at it as a resident, so I'm obviously not a council officer, but I have a close friendship with Carolina, who's Polish and a council officer in Birmingham City Council. And we talk about this metaphor of the bridge, that you have to build the bridge. It doesn't necessarily exist. That bridge of trust, of, again, shared knowledge. From my side of the bridge, talk about, yes, our pilot is one kind of intervention. We're already starting at household, street, neighborhood level, where people are close to food waste but need some support. There are going to be other interventions that are further upstream. But just going back to our pilot, I think it's so having relationships of trust, it's an obvious thing, but I really put a lot on even in institutional partnerships, that every institution, there's still some person that it has to be some kind of personal relationship and rapport that you're building. And also, I think, so from our side, residents, we've experienced how they can mobilize when they are connected and feel like they have some skin in the game. What I also would like to see from our council is, you use that term nudges or incentives. For example, it could be really creative to say, in Birmingham, we know that by 2025, there's going to have to be, it would be illegal to send food waste to landfill. So food waste will have to be separated from general rubbish. Currently, there's no plan. That's why we're doing this. So I think a creative outcome with the council could be, what if you start to incentivize, maybe lower your council tax where you have a registered group with Make Soil that's registered, that's doing it. Give them an incentive or give them something to show that you're actually valuing it. So again, I think the trust and relationship and also some incentives to leverage what residents are willing to do would be a creative way forward.
Thank you, Samuel. Alice, is that also something that's, yes, cross-cutting managers and circularity for the project, that you also recognize this idea of, yeah, cities being a bridge for engaging with stakeholders on the topic of food waste?
Yes, definitely. Actually, we have some stakeholders that might be more directly linked to the work that we do, whether it's the school feeding program managers or the food bank, but then, or the food markets, the wholesale market. But then you have a whole network of other stakeholders that you need to engage. We've tried testing ways of reducing food waste, whether it's by engaging like nutritionists or by engaging experts in the topic, or even the logistics, you know, to know if we can redistribute these food waste and how we can repurpose it before it becomes, for example, compost. If it needs to be sent to the food bank, for example, you need to coordinate a lot of these actors. So I would say that we would have both partners in the business environment and the citizens, for sure. And the communication is different with the two types of stakeholders, but it's all about really reframing the topic, reframing the conversation about waste. This is what Samuel was saying before. Waste is just an excess of something, that it's not a concept per se, and we just need to find a place for this excess. Like, it shouldn't be a concept anymore. So we just have to engage in better conversations with all the stakeholders, but without the partnerships and stakeholders, the circular economy is not possible by definition.
Thank you, Alice. We have a lot of questions in the Q&A, so thank you everyone for that. So we're gonna start right away. First set of questions is from Stephanie Wunder, mostly addressed to Natalia, asking how did you manage to convince your local policymakers to work with the design thinking process? How did you manage? And maybe you can start with answering this first question.
Okay, so this is when it is very practical to have EU-funded projects, because we didn't convince them. Actually, we applied to the project, and as city officer, it's more like a bottom-up approach, where we decided that this project can be exactly a case to show afterwards that it works, and it is like a very good solution to have. To use this kind of approach, like design thinking, service design, human-centered design, etc., etc. So actually, participating in FoodTrails, it enabled us to really implement this approach.
Thanks, Natalia, and indeed, J2 EU project. Question then following that, also still from Stephanie, is on how did you manage to select what area to focus on? Was it based on likely impact or on other criteria? And then also related to the impact, have you already been able to measure this impact?
Yes, so as I mentioned in my presentation, we first did a desk research. We knew that we will focus on, we had other plans initially, but still we decided that we will focus on food waste reduction and prevention, also because it is aligned with the draft of the food policy that Warsaw has been working on. And this is such a generic topic that we could then focus on what kind of target groups we want to address. But again, this is a quite complex system, and we decided also to make another desk research to understand which groups are wasting food, at which steps, and also which groups we can really, as a city, as a university, help, where we can intervene, because we have a limited scope of resources, time, etc., etc. So we had to balance between all these aspects. And then we selected the restaurants, the small restaurants also, because they were impacted by the COVID. And we decided that they might need some support also, because we've seen that most of the restaurants that survived the crisis were restaurants that had community around themselves. And we wanted to design a solution that will enable them to reach out to consumers, etc., etc. So we had this in mind. This was one of the reasons why we selected this group. And then regarding the food, the organizations receiving food from a food bank, it was also like in the aftermath of the refugee crisis, when we decided that looking at these food optimization challenges that are faced by the organization, that we as a city, again, as a university, we can intervene by supporting people working for more vulnerable populations, obviously. And that was also one of the criteria that we felt we can offer some solutions that will be afterwards scalable, because this is a model that we worked on all together, but the aim is, of course, to make it scalable and to replicate it in other organizations. And regarding your question about the impact, yes, we are currently analyzing. We've made like an audit afterwards to see if the amount of food waste has decreased. Also, what were the behaviors of the staff, and also we sent a survey to other organizations. Are they ready? Would they be interested in implementing such a solution? And if yes, which parts, etc. So we have also all these evaluation impact assessment dimension, and it's the same for the campaign. We are currently in the middle of it. We've sent it to 300 restaurants in Warsaw, so we will see how it will work.
Thanks, Natalia, for your answer. Samuel, I have a question for you now regarding your work with the city of Birmingham, and a question: to what extent the budget cuts of your city council is a significant barrier to further scale up the project, and whether that's a topic of discussion.
That's a good question, man. It is a topic. It's kind of a joke in that probably FoodTrails was probably the last EU funded project that's happened through Birmingham, just because of the way, you know, Brexit played out. So again, the funding for what we did under Who Said This Is Rubbish as part of FoodTrails, that was ring fenced. It was protected. What happens in the future is absolutely a live question. It's kind of up for grabs. And, you know, we have a new mayor. So I can't predict how that would go, but I think it's a really relevant question. And can I just add, there was one right below it about the 3 infrastructures. I just wanted to quickly respond to that too as well.
Please.
Yes, we talk, there's the social infrastructure, the green infrastructure, the kit, and the imagination infrastructure. The imagination infrastructure, I should footnote, Rob Hopkins, he's a thinker who talks about, he wrote a book called From What Is to What If, and imagination infrastructure is his term about how we make that shift. What is represents status quo. What if represents that whole range of possibilities. So with food waste, there's a range of interventions, a range of options besides as alternatives to the industrial pattern, which is just to pay someone to take it away, because there is no away. Away is just someone else's problem somewhere else. So the short answer is it's concurrently. We talk about, if you can imagine Venn diagrams, these overlapping circles, I think that's the thing. It doesn't matter so much which comes first as making them overlap. If you only have one, if you just have, basically they need to overlap. And I do really believe it goes back to sort of primary school and how we learn as humans. But I really do believe in the power of show and tell, or come and see. When you hold up the banana peel or when you show the worms, you show the things that we used to call rubbish. That's where the imagination sparks. And without it, there's a blockage, because we actually need, with our bodies and our hands, to experience that. So to get them going, overlapping, I think is where the magic happens. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Samuel. Alicia, a question for you as an expert on the circularity in cities. It's a question from Christina that asked that, yeah, in smaller cities with limited resource, some of the cities do not have dedicated policy officers in charge of food issues. So the question is, what could be the solution to enable food waste reduction actions, and which actors should get involved?
That's a very interesting question. So we have two cities in FoodTrails that are very small, Bergamo in Italy and Funchal in the island of Madeira in Portugal. Those cities have started from other departments, whether it's like international relations department or it's the social work department. So, for example, Funchal, they have a strong connection with the social district in the city, and they do reskilling in this social district, and they started integrating composting and gardening into these districts. And this little project evolved. Then they were able to apply to become a member of FoodTrails, of the project of FoodTrails. So they got more funding through the European Union. But that led them to scale up their work that they were already doing as social workers with the social communities into a more structured work of urban gardening, engaging the schools in contests for the best gardens or for the best compost, creating educational material. So you can start from another department, whether it's the waste department or the agricultural department, or really anything, because again, food is related to all food waste specifically is related to many other topics, even the education department, communication, and sometimes it's from urban planning, you know. And then based on that, you can see what are the opportunities, whether if it's support from a very engaged local stakeholder, maybe an association or an organization like Samuel's that started with the Birmingham project. Or yeah, it can be a European project if you get the chance to apply for funding. And yeah, start from there, start from smaller pilots. The good thing about the FoodTrails project is that you have 11 cities working on different food issues. Almost half of them include food waste in a way or another. Some others include more communities, innovation, or nutrition, or procurement. But the ones that include food waste, they're all doing different pilot projects. And each pilot is a small scale test that then can be expanded and replicated, as Natalia mentioned before. So none of the cities started with big impact, but then slowly you build up the impact. And when you scale, you can scale fast once you prove that something is working. And the other thing that I suggest, again, is to really map out the food streams in your city. So if you collect data and you start presenting this data to local stakeholders or to the council, to the municipality council, then you can start measuring, start making some hypotheses and testing. So data is super important on this.
I can just add quickly that, for example, we have no food policy dedicated to food-related issues in officers, or dedicated to food-related issues in Warsaw, for example. So even in bigger city, but we are all scattered around different departments. And as we work on EU project, I'm in the international cooperation department. My colleague is in the economic development department. So, and we have other colleagues working on food in the social department. So yeah, it's all overlapping a bit. It's a transversal topic, so indeed you can find people in different departments working on it.
Yeah, so there is a bridge to create from outside the municipality, but also from within to tackle these
Can I
issues.
add one thing?
Of course.
Because I think it links to another question that was posted, but you can seek inspiration on the European Commission website, where there are some, there is a page on European actions against food waste. So you can go and look into that, or look into the local community of European Climate Pact ambassadors. Those are normal citizens that volunteer to spread the word about the Green Deal in Europe. So if you find any of those or other associations, I think they can help you gather the data or kickstart some work.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Alice. If you also have the link, by the way, please don't hesitate to share it in the chat as well. We have 4 minutes left, so maybe I'll ask one more question to all of you.
Yeah.
Go for it, Natalia.
No, I just wanted to address one question because I think it's very interesting and it's a problem an issue, challenge we all have in cities. I've seen the question here in the chat. Let me find it or not. I don't. Oh yeah, it's from Hanin Al-Jifri. Sorry if I said it not properly, but about the primary concern regarding food waste in urban areas. This is a big question, but what I wanted to highlight from a city perspective, what's really very challenging is that we lack data about food waste. Also, there are many different definitions of food waste. So, for example, by doing our pilots, we first have to select a definition of what we consider being food waste concretely, because there are different definitions. And also, we were faced quite quickly with the fact that we don't have too many data about how is food waste looking in our city, actually, because it's so many different, it's such a complex system first, but also we don't have these habit or resources that we are tracking what kind of food waste happens where at which stage. So it was also why we have used this method of like evidence-based approach, because we first wanted to understand what is happening, and we could do it on a very small segment. So it's very hard to know where to start, actually, but for us, one of the most important aspects was to map the food flow within each of our target groups, for example. So in the restaurants, from the starting with the menu design, for example, up until food waste. And the same is in the organizations receiving food. So for us, it was very important. We've made actually like a food journey map. Where is food waste occurring? What are the drivers, like enhancing food waste? What are the causes behind? And also who answers for it, like the roles behind, to have like a good understanding, the minimum one at least, of what is happening within our city. So I would say that that is one of the most challenging issues for us. Just not to extend too much, but I don't want which question you wanted to address, Lucie, but
that was actually this one. So that's
okay.
That's perfect. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you. It's already 1:28, so I think we'll have to finish the questions here. But yeah, thank you all so much. As you can see it in the chat, there is also a lot of links being shared and a lot of initiatives. So yeah, I invite all of you to have a look at this and to don't hesitate to contact us if you also have more questions on how you can also tackle food waste in your city. Thank you very much, Samuel, Natalia, Alice, for your presentations and for your active participation in what you're doing and in tackling food waste in cities. For everyone, again, I hope you found this session as interesting as I did. There is still a lot of different episodes coming up, actually once every week until the end of June. So yeah, I hope you have a lot of Tuesday lunchtime free. I'll share again the calendar with you so you can have a look and subscribe to the next webinars. I'll give also a bit more food for thought for everyone. So as part of also the FoodTrails project, as it is the last year of the project, we will also soon be launching a handbook that will take also into account one of these recommendations of how to tackle food waste, amongst also a lot of other episodes. So I also invite you to follow us on the social media to be in touch when the handbook is gonna be released. Another opportunity is coming for you is linked with another project called Clever Food. We are currently looking for 20 food lab and food policy labs initiatives that might also be working on food waste, for example, to take part in a peer learning program and eventually also have access to some funding to go further in your project. So I'll also share the link there, so you can all have a look and hopefully sign up and apply for it. Yeah, that's it, I think, for today. Thank you again for everyone for joining. Thank you for all our speakers for these super interesting insights. And thank you to Marius, our man in the shadow, for organizing the logistical aspect of this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As well.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.